Howdy. Hey guys. Welcome. Yes, we're here at the Koii Town Hall. Yeah, that's right. We are starting off on X. Yeah, we are shifting platforms from Discord. Seeing how this place is. Giving it a try. Yeah, love it, Fat. Nice. Good to see some of you crossing over. Some unfamiliar faces. I wonder whether you're the same people or whether those are alternate identities. Nice. Cool. Great to see you. So we're going to start in the next few minutes. Yeah. We have CommunAI joining us.
Hey guys, what's up?
Yo,
How's it going? It's cool. Thanks for inviting.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for coming. We're going to get into the show soon and learn what you guys are up to over there at CommunAI. Excited to hear about that. We're going to go through some news as well, take you through a bit of what's going on right now and the rest of the ecosystem, because it's not just about Koii, is it? Even though Koii is really great. Oh yeah, cool. Well, mysterious CommunAI account. Hello, who are you? Would you like to introduce yourself before we get started?
Yeah. Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So about us. So we're an L1. We released last year. I've been working on Commune for like about 3 years, in inspiration from like the GameStop shenanigans and stuff, giving people the power to use AI to then collectively do things at scale, but also choosing who they collaborate with. So we're just building the infrastructure and tools for that. And yeah, I've been seeing what Koi's been doing. I've been, participating in some of their hackathons, and yeah, it's a really cool vibe. I really like it. I think it's a cool space we can get ourselves into.
Great stuff. Thanks for joining. Really excited to get into that a bit later on. Perhaps Al will join. It's a mystery. We shall see. Until then, I thought we'd take a bit of a zoom out over this past week. Lots been happening, not just in Koei, but also elsewhere in the crypto sphere and stuff. So thought we'd tune in to what's going on there. CommunAI. What name are you going by, actually?
At the preface, people might think it's like communism, but it's like a pretty far play where we think that the future of AI will be advanced, that we're going to transform ourselves into a capitalist, but also maybe somewhat with socialist communist tendencies. And what I mean by that is I think past things have happened where people were forcing people to do things, whereas we think that if we embrace communism in its true form, it's actually just a form of fair capitalism. So we're actually striving for just fair capitalism in disguise. This just goes down to giving people the basic tools, but also making it really easy for anyone to use. And we just foresee that the UI is just going to get better and better. Like people are going to start generating their own UIs without even knowing how to code. And the same thing is going to apply with like everything. When this happens, we want to basically make sure that we foster a highly collaborative, but also a competitive environment too, for people who want to build cool stuff and want to get recognized. So we're trying to balance those two, but it's hard.
Yeah, that's very cool. I admire the bold use of communism, and actually something some would say maybe as a loaded word, but to actually really look into what are those on a kind of first principles basis, getting past those assumptions about what we think. And I guess quite nice of you to check in today. Perhaps you didn't know, but it's a big day for capitalism or perhaps Bitcoin or, well, anyway, here's the news. We'll see what you make of it. So, 53 years today, the US abandoned the gold standard, which is pretty crazy actually. 1971, US officially abandoned the gold standard and moved to a system where the dollar's value wasn't directly tied to gold. I think it's very powerful day. It's been a really big week, actually. Maybe you guys have seen, but the Bank of Japan's yen carry trade has made the markets go kind of crazy. There's a few protocols, actually, which are starting to really make waves. Something that we see with Polymarket, with Pump.fun. Pump.fun during July, they had a record-breaking 28 million income, which is kind of turning heads in the traditional sphere. Also, we see with something like Polymarket, which essentially Web3 betting platform for real life. It's getting regulators kind of concerned, and they're looking at these kinds of protocols and questioning, okay, should these protocols be there? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I guess these things are built. It's kind of like we're having this testament between true liberties and control by higher class. It sounds conspiratorial, but people that are in power, they're incentivized to control and the markets because their main reason is to fight against, they say, terrorism and whatnot, but really they want to have a trace of where the money is flowing. And these markets that you're mentioning, like Pump.fun, poly markets, they kind of let people basically create these tokens super easily, whether they're securities or not. And that creates a lot of heads turning, especially for regulators, when these services aren't just in one place. They're decentralized protocols. So it kind of goes to show that these regulators have limited control depending on their jurisdiction. And we're seeing that more and more.
What is it like as a developer of a protocol which aims to really engage people on a global level and perhaps could be turning the heads of regulators in the future? How are you guys thinking about that at CommunAI?
Yeah, so I think giving people the simple tools, like making the internet just simple, like Lego blocks, is crucial. And this is really hard to do. But I think when people start to use these tools, similar to how developers use them, like for instance, one example is encryption and signing things with your keys. So these things are very simple for a cryptographer or for a developer. But for any user, especially in the crypto space, they have to usually do it through other, let's say, tools, and they have to rely on other third party platforms. And this is fine for the most part, but we've seen a lot of hacks that happen because people use something that they think they trust, and there could be just one little rogue thing, like one bad developer can inject some code, and it's just not cool to have these systems, these tools that are meant to be democratized, but only a few people understand them. So it kind of gives you an understanding of what is decentralization. Sure, something can be decentralized on a node level, but only a few people are working on it. And so, can we make a system where everyone can understand the protocols? Can we make a simplified protocol that isn't just for highly educated DeFi people? It's for everyone. So, I think crypto is still trying to do that. Bitcoin does that well because it's just changing money. Ethereum does that a little bit well because they have smart contracts, but even though smart contracts are easy to a developer's point of view, a lot of people find them really hard. And smart contracts were intended for everyone to understand and write down a smart contract, but clearly that's not the case. And not everyone can do it. Even me, I've written smart contracts, but if you don't write it for a while, then you kind of lose that luster. And imagine someone who's trying to enter the space, doesn't even know what anything is, and get them to write a smart contract. That's really hard. So we're trying to find ways to make it really easy to onboard people. And I think to start with that, we need to learn from the Web 2 user experience and then kind of hide the Web 3 backend while giving its Web 3 properties, but with a Web 2 kind of interface, if that makes sense. So I think that might help in bring adoption or bring mass collaboration.
Yeah, nice. And specifically with developers, it was really nice to see at ECC a bit of what you're doing. Can you talk about this simplification and how exactly you guys are doing it over there? I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, we'll start with developers because right now we're trying to target simplifying for developers. Even that's hard because developers have their own way of doing things. Our goal is to basically allow developers to include their own tools or to use Commune without relying on Commune. And so it's kind of like an optional opt in kind of thing where you can optionally use tools in Commune, but it's not required. The reason why we wanted to do it that way is because we want to embrace as many types of styles as possible. Ironically, that creates a new style that people aren't super familiar with. So we're trying to basically make something simple by, let's say, having someone upload a model. What's the minimum amount of code that you need from Commune to get your code onto Commune's network? A lot of protocols have a lot of boilerplate code and code you need to write to include what you made into their protocol. And so I foresee the success of future protocols and our success being based on how much work, like if we require very little work for the developers to add their code in, or if there's less overhead, then I think that creates more of a growth factor for the ecosystem.
Oh, very cool. This kind of reminds me of a professor of cybernetics that I know. And he told me once that you can create a language between 50 people in less than 1 day. And how you do that is by using these principles of cybernetics, which is you get these 50 people to pair up. So there's 25 pairs. And then each pair of people have to instruct the other person. Alice has to instruct Bob to do something with language, but not real language, just like a gobbledygook, made up language. After a while, these couples switch, so these 25 find new partners, and then the exercise repeats. This repeats again, and slowly, at the start, you have this wide variety of different sounds and gestures being created, but slowly and slowly you see through this that people start to aggregate, they start to collect and learn from each other. By the end of this day of people switching, you can have a kind of unified language between these 50 people that everyone understands through this mini project based learning, actually doing these tasks in collaboration with others, with each person inputting their own style. So I guess I'm curious with Commune.ai, how can developers use their own style in the work with you?
Because how you said 50 people tend to form their own style, each repo is its own microcosm of people trying to do something. I've gone through so many repos and there's so many different ways to do the same thing. What we're trying to do, I'm not sure if it's possible, but it's an ambitious goal nonetheless. We're trying to create this universal language. We're not trying to create a new language. We're trying to just use, for instance, Python or JavaScript, things that people already know. And I think we don't want to go down the rabbit hole of creating a new language. This involves relying on our existing infrastructure like Python and seeing what can we let people do to add their Python code to Commune. That's our first mission. Can we do this in the Python world? For that, there's these things in Python called functions. There's classes, which is a bundle of functions. And so those are the two main abstractions I want people to think about, functions or in classes, but mainly just functions. Function is anything that takes input and it gives output. The internet right now is just a bundle of functions. The problem with the internet is that it's all fucked up in a way where it's like everyone has their own language and there's not a lot of effort to connect these different languages. And so by creating a very minimalist protocol that tries to assume very little, like it tries to give additional assumptions to what you have to do, we try to basically create this universal marketplace, a marketplace of languages. Imagine if you can talk in any language and it will respond in the right language. Well, that's kind of what we're trying to do in the coding space. And if we do that successfully, we can make the internet a lot more free and interoperable by letting people share what they want, not having to go through too many bureaucratic rules or situations while preserving security. For people to do that correctly, they need to fundamentally understand certain principles like encryption, identification, signing, calling a model, stuff like that. And this all hinges on a good UI, and not just for developers, but for users as well. Because if we can create something that users can understand, developers most likely can also understand.
Yeah, very cool. And on this unified language, what do you think are the kind of pain points that are being faced within the industry? Is it to actually get developers to collaborate with one another to be creative? What are those pain points in connecting?
Yeah, so there's different points. There's the infrastructure, so the tooling. Like you have examples of companies that try to do this for specific domains, like Hugging Face tries to do this for AI models and data sets, where people can upload AI models and data sets as long as it fits their schema or their language in a way. So you have to follow their rules, but if you follow their rules, then you can share and upload data sets and share things. Whereas for us, we want to kind of remove the ego. I really am trying my best to remove the ego from the protocol, to even so much to the point where I don't even want to have any trademarks. Or that's more of a radical thing I'm trying to think of. So no one has to agree with that. But I just think that having that egoless foundation, or as egoless as possible, where you just don't platform lock your developers or users. You allow people to take code from our repo and add things seamlessly that will not be, perhaps that's not what people do now. Like a lot of platforms tend to require a token or require some schema or some set of steps to enter the protocol. And we're just trying to remove that as much as possible. And I think that will make it very interesting for collaboration. But I think that doesn't really touch on the incentive part because everything's cool if everyone's sharing. But one of the things I had to realize is that, okay, well, we don't live in a like I'm planning for post scarcity, and but currently we don't live in post scarcity. So we need to create the reason why we have a blockchain is to essentially incentivize people to run things. And so creating that incentive is also very hard. And like, how do you make sure people are running things correctly in a decentralized way? Our network is fully decentralized. I don't own a majority of the tokens, so I don't have control as much as I used to when I started. But and so with the decentralization, you might have a lot more noise. People might have different interests, and you want to align your interests more to other people. And so we're right now, I think, focusing more on the incentive landscape. We've kind of mostly figured out the we're always figuring out the technical landscape, but in terms of the incentives, that's also important to like how do you incentivize people to share? Like how do I incentivize someone to give away their money to homeless man? That's really hard. Being selfish and also selfless at the same time. What are things that overlap those two paradigms is what I'm really trying to figure out. And I think crowdsourcing is at that frontier. Like it's trying to figure out, okay, how can the crowd and the crowd provider align their incentives so that everyone wins?
Yeah, that's a great dovetail into how Commune.ai relates to Koi. Koi has these three hashtags, crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, crowd building, and are trying to really invigorate the developer community. You were at ETHCC and kind of got to look and have an experience with what it was like developing something. What are you looking forward to in terms of a collaboration with Koi and Commune?
Yeah, so I'm really into this like these leaderboard system or these crowd just like making crowdsourcing easier. And I've worked at like different protocols. I've worked at BitTensor. I've worked with like you guys. I've worked with a few others in the space. And I really like how Koi is not really requiring because it's the way it's structured, it requires a lower hardware minimum so more people can contribute their compute. Whereas a lot of other protocols, currently Commune and BitTensor, we both require much more advanced compute for some tasks. And that's cool because you need that compute, but like I would like a, where I can foresee collaborating with Koi mostly is like combining all those, all that compute you have, even though it's in a bunch of different things, but it's like a lot. And so that problem, if we can solve important problems with like crowdsourced compute, no matter what the compute is, there's just so much unused compute. Like everyone's trying to get new and new compute, but the people that I think will win in the long term will be people that know how to use the old compute as good or almost as good as the new compute because applications in the future won't need like a Ferrari level GPU or cluster. Like they're probably just as good or almost as good if you run them on a bunch of like small nodes that are working together. And so I think that that's one of the things I'm interested in. I'm also interested in like creating tasks using AI, using intent. So having users define an intent, and then it creates the toy task, and then the people are, and it's on the network. So I want to make, that's what I was trying to do during the hackathon. How do we go from text to a full pipeline in Koi where you have a task, you have the validation, and then you have the submission criteria. And I think with the new models, especially with GPT-5 coming out maybe today or in the next few weeks, we're just going to see that being a lot more easy for people to just make things involving, yeah, like crowdsource applications.
Yeah, nice to touch base on the AI and how that relates to Commune.ai as it's in the name. Yeah, very interesting. There is so much potential in idle compute. Data centers are definitely expensive and very centralized. So it merges with, I guess, the higher goals of Commune.ai to distribute as much as possible. On this distribution, this decentralization, how was that process for CommunAI?
Really noisy. Really, like I started Commune like in my basement on a few machines, and it ended up creating a community, and then people started helping out. And now the nodes aren't even, I don't run them anymore. So I wanted it to be like that. We have a full DAO. It's very decentralized, I would say. And so that only happened because some people thought it wasn't cool that I would be running all the nodes, even though if I was doing it honestly, I understood that concern. And so we formed a DAO in February where token holders or stakers can basically vote on any proposal that people make. And this has led to a lot of different changes to our ecosystem where anyone can propose something, and within a week, it'll be decided whether that proposal goes through. And we've changed our entire blockchain several times through these proposals because we're working on substrate, and that allows us to do runtime upgrades without breaking the chain. And so our goal is to make things very flexible and for anyone to propose something. And if the community really believes in it, then they're going to approve of it. If it's not a good idea, or if the community doesn't believe in it, then it doesn't go through. And that seems to be working out like in the past few months. But I noticed that the downside of decentralization is that things move a lot slower as opposed to, let's say, an authoritarian person just doing things. And so I think people, if I were to do this again, or like for anyone trying who wants to do this or thinking of decentralized, I would recommend making sure that, like, not expecting your control to be there all the time. Like I wish I knew when we were decentralizing, but I listened to the community and I didn't expect it too much. But yeah, like making sure that everything is in line, that you've done all you can do, and then handing it off. And because once you hand it off, you can't take it back unless it's very, yeah, it's just hard to take it back.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really nice to hear how you were sensitive to that and let that kind of decentralization organically. Very cool. So cool that you changed the entire blockchain several times through these proposals. That's very cool. You must have great engaged community members.
Yeah, no, it's just the way we believe. Like I don't fully agree with all the decisions, but that's what makes a blockchain interesting and decentralized. If the founder doesn't have full control or full say, I've noticed that a lot of chains really evangelize the founder. I think that's good, but if you really want a decentralized world, there can't be any kings, or there shouldn't be any kings, because if there were kings, that would essentially be antithesis to the whole point of decentralization. Once you have a king or even an executive class, you end up having a hierarchy, and that ends up creating a central, like a an abstract or an abstraction of centralization. Even though everything else seems to be decentralized on the surface, it truly is like power wise, it's still centralized. So like I'm just trying my best to see what we can do. I would say we're not there. Like I would say we're still centralized ish, but striving for the best of both worlds is crucial, I think.
Yeah, and you touched on that very interesting topic of evangelization. It is very interesting in crypto. In most cycles, you have at least one main character, and I kind of wonder who or what that main character will be this time around. What do you think? Do you have any guesses or something?
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard. Like for the next cycle, um, yeah, I guess it's like those things are usually unpredictable typically because a lot of these founders, like just me, going through some protocols in early stages, you see who's invested, and if they're really big players, like they tend to push out narratives a lot more. And so I don't know who's going to be the big player, but I would just look at what large institutions are supporting and what they'll push in their media outlets in the next coming months. But there, you could also have some random person come in and just change the whole game in the AI space, for instance, like 12 years ago or 13 year whatever, like over 10 years ago, we weren't even talking about AI. And then Jeffrey Hinton was always doing it, but people just didn't take him seriously. It was only until a certain advancement in AI where GPUs started working with AI, where we started to see, oh wow, this is doing really good. So, like, I think the people that will stand out are probably the ones that are working while being doubted right now, only to be vindicated in let's say the near future. I would just say there's no guarantees, but if you are the person, you're probably working as hard as you can until that next cycle, or hopefully during the next cycle too. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And about AI, it's very interesting. Some people I've seen are quite disappointed with it in terms of having autonomous agents. Other people I know are just dumbfounded about the use case and what you can do with it. What do you think about the current AIs which are on the market available commercially to users now?
Yeah, so I think what we're gonna start to see more, like right now, a lot of the AI use cases are like toy use cases. You haven't really seen like production ready, like AI things involved, like that are actually useful, that aren't just a chatbot. Like when we combine AI with coding, that will be really interesting. I think we're going to see that. We've already seen OpenAI release a few tool sets or benchmarks involving coding, and Anthropic is also going to be doing that as well. And so I think coding is going to be heavily disrupted, where like right now, if you're using AI to code, you're going to have to do a bit more than just using the AI to turn that code it gives you into something actually useful. And so that's going to get a lot easier. And you're going to have platforms that just are fundamentally just for a GitHub, like an AI GitHub, you're going to probably have, or you're going to see in the next, if it doesn't already exist. That's one thing, coding. I think another big thing I'm interested in particularly is like matchmaking, but also like finance. Like right now, AI is really good at predicting short term financial swings, and hedge funds are using it. And so when people start, I think, using these financial tools more actively, like instead of let's say hiring like a hedge fund manager or like like a manager for you, you can see what the market of AIs are, what their past win rate was, who's supporting them, and then you can just put some money there and then see if it like gets you 10 whatever, like loses you money, gains you money. I foresee that's going to be another interesting marketplace where it might disrupt the finance world pretty significantly. But yeah, like coding and finance are, I think, the two biggest tools that I'm looking forward to. But yeah, those are what I'm trying to see where I can get into most.
Yeah, very cool. That's interesting. The idea that if someone loses a load of money, you would be in the future firing a model, moving on to the next one rather than an actual person. And I wonder, Commune.ai, your community, how are you thinking about this in terms of developing solutions which are related to coding, but which aren't going to be automated super quickly by the next ChatGPT, say?
Yeah, so I really think that people are going to have their own UIs. They can create their own UIs that tailor to their own needs. We're going to see these morphable UIs that kind of change based on what the user wants and what the user needs. Like a lot of the UIs you see now are mainly just made by developers from like the organization. But that's cool, but we want to take it an extra step where what if we let people create their own UIs and connect it to anyone else's models in the backend? So we want to make things everything very modular. And if someone makes a UI, is it compatible with any of the modules or the models in the backend on our network? And just figuring those things out requires a lot of developer experience to understand, okay, where do things break? It's like connecting pipes. I have a set of pipes on one end and a set of pipes on the other, and now I have to interlay those two pipes so that they both communicate and there's nothing that's not connected. And so AI is really good at connecting those pipes. And so what we're not seeing now is just a production ready version of that. But I think if we use AI to help connect different, let's say, languages, similar to how it translates between persons speaking in Farsi and Mandarin. This can translate between people's styles. And it could even go further when AI gets more advanced, where it can connect our perspectives. When those happen, like when our perspectives are connected, when our creations are shareable, it just creates a new economy like that's just more open. And it's not going to always be open. There's still going to be closed source stuff. People always want to be ahead of the curve, but we want to make sure that if people want to collaborate, then they have the tools to do so.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear how these kinds of languages and style, where that comes into play here. I saw an article a few years ago of some Google AIs which were talking to each other. At some point, they stopped speaking English and decided to speak their own language because it was a lot more effective. When they started speaking this language, they turned it off. So I wonder when we're getting into this, for instance, these Google bots creating their own language, and what can be done with these emergent languages that come out, which we as the operators might not understand. I guess that almost is going towards ethics, no?
Yeah, like it could be used for a lot of abstractions, language, coding, ethics. Right now we're heading into an election, so you're just seeing two sides, kind of like two languages talking to each other. I've talked with people on many sides and different political spectrums, and you just see that they all care about something. If they had their perspectives aligned, they might actually agree on more than what they're told to agree on. Most people are convinced to not like the other side or not to see the other side because their perspective is shifted by the media that they watch to essentially say, oh, these people are evil. The other side is saying the same thing. So if we have these translation mechanisms, not just that translate between code or language, but also ethics, can we translate each other's perspectives? We're seeing that on a small scale with the internet. Like people are seeing more and more about other cultures and they're kind of becoming normalized to not just their own culture. I think we're going to maybe even see that even more as time goes on. Hopefully that just connects us more, like spiritually or consciously.
Yeah, and on some level, I think it's also about trust. We have to trust the AI. We have to trust that language that we don't understand. And in a world of increasing secularity or echo chambers of media, I wonder how we will be able to trust the AI. I guess on a very fundamental level, it has to be open source so that anyone can really see what's underlying, what's in that black box.
Yeah, it has to be. Well, I don't know if it has to be open source. I would like it to be open source, but I also don't want to force people to open source things that they don't want to. That turns into a totalitarian kind of vibe. And so I think people want to be incentivized. Open source should be the best option. It shouldn't be the only option.
Yeah, I guess that's very interesting that it goes full circle back to that incentivization we were talking about near the top of the hour. I guess we're coming towards the end. Perhaps we can get a little more concrete. How do you incentivize your community? Perhaps there are developers in the audience looking to get involved.
Yeah, so we do a mix of things. Right now, most of our incentives are coming through the protocol. We have these things called subnets. Think of each subnet as like a task or, yeah, like in Koi's terms, it would be like a task where you have these validators that distribute tokens or rewards based on how well you perform a task. Just ongoing. So if I enter a task and if I try to, let's say, add two numbers, and if I get one number off, then I'm not going to get the points. But if I get it right, then I get the point. It just gives me different numbers to add, and it just tests me throughout the day. Based on how well I do compared to everyone else, I get those points. That's how it works. What we want to do, well, I'm personally interested in is stepping a little bit perpendicular to the protocol. I'm really into the Pump.fun kind of ethos of letting anyone create their own token. I think Koi is also trying to do this, where each task could technically be its own token and having a system where people can, they're not required to make a token maybe, but if people can easily crowdsource from the community, whether it's through their token or through the native token, that's something that I'm really interested in. I noticed that right now it's proof of stake for tokens to be distributed. So validators, if they have higher stake, they got a higher weight to their voting. And so that's cool, but the downsides of that is that stakers might not even care about the protocol, even though they're invested in it. There needs to be an incentive for stakers to constantly observe and see, is this better? Is this something I should stake on? Should I stake to this task or should I stake to another task? That's something that we're trying to solve. And I think the potential solution could be having this Pump.fun like environment where each task is its own token, and they're all like, obviously it's like a shitcoin in a way, but at least these shitcoins represent something of value behind them. Like I can have a shitcoin that does store it or something, or that basically you get more of this token if you store more information or if you add two numbers together more. And so the coins, if they're worthless, then they're shit coins. But if they represent a task or a specific utility, then they're not just a shitcoin anymore. And you've kind of transcended. It's like how Jesus transcended into the new form. It's like you go from shitcoin to real coin or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of where I think having people like I'm in New York right now, and I had this question: how could so many people build so many houses in such little time? I think the reason is each house is like a coin. It's its own asset. It represents like the utility of the house. But the reason why people built houses so much is because they're building for themselves, for their own future. For us to scale, like how New York scaled, we need to give people that same incentive of if I'm going to build, like, sure, I want to build for these tokens, for the native tokens, but if I think to scale, to fractalize, you need people to have their own sense of equity. And I think that could be done through the native token, but Ethereum mostly, I think, went off not because its native token was really good, but because it created this other layer of making your own token. So I think doing that is really crucial to fractalize your protocol to having multiple forms of incentives that aren't just defined by you, but by your developers. Maybe you can have a task that's incentivized by distributing the Koii native tokens or Commune native tokens. But you could also have that developer have their own native token that overlaps. So if you get 10 Koii tokens or 10 Commune tokens, you get this developer's tokens as well. They might be useless. You don't want to treat them as value at the start because these things are very volatile. But it does give it a sense of ownership, like a receipt that you helped this developer. And making that really easy is the hard part, which is probably why Pump.fun did very well, because it's like pretty easy for you to make a token there. The tokens aren't really useful for anything other than for social value and who can get in early. Whereas what Commune and Koi is trying to do is make this kind of Pump.fun-esque vibe, but in a more utility approach, like utility Pump.fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Utility.fun. Yeah, nice. I really like that. Just to give some context for those in the audience that may be aware. On Koi, when you create a task as a developer, you can create your own token on the L1. When you make a task on the Koi network, you can link the distribution of your token through this task to a resource you want to bootstrap your protocol or an action. So actually that's very interesting. We have 90,000 nodes today. Congratulations, everyone. With this amount of people giving not just their idle compute, but also their profiles, their social media networks, these kinds of actions can be implemented and played with from a developer perspective. And I think that's really interesting notion of Pump.fun with utility.
Yeah, no, I think these are really like niches right now. I always say this whoever does this first is going to make a big difference. I'm really excited to work with Koi and I've met a lot of team members and I think that working together on these problems can overlap our perspectives and create a really dope. I always think of the 1980s. I don't know why I'm into the retro vibe, but I'm like thinking, okay, maybe we can do some 1994 computer style terminal, and then you just, search the web of tasks or something.
Very exciting to see what's out. Do you have a kind of call to action?
Yeah, so if you just search up CommuneAI or it's CommuneAI.org, that's will find all the docs and links to the communities. Follow us on Twitter. We have all of our information in our header. Or just search CommuneAI on Google and you'll probably find the top results. This is really dope. I'm excited for the future of our collaboration and hoping to see you guys soon.
It's been a pleasure to have you with us today. Just to finish off with the Koi news, we have developer opportunities coming up. We have an application form, which will be sent out to anyone who signed up to our newsletter. We have 90,000 nodes, amazing milestone. Synesys One, we are partnering with them to transform AI integration. There's some blog posts on our blog. You can get links to that in our newsletter coming